You. Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Johnson, the State Vice President from the Northern Virginia region, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's session of the Foundation Leadership Institute Virtual Leadership Experience. We thank the many individuals and organizations who support Virginia FBLA by sponsoring our activities and programs, including Dennis Gartman in Suffolk and Julie and Virginia Leonard. During today's session, you can use the chat feature to comment and ask questions that will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Here to tell us how to interview and win the job from Estes Express, please welcome Mr. Pat Martin.
Thank you, Zach. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So I guess it's good afternoon, everybody. Looks like everybody's at home. Is that correct? Yeah. So I hope everybody's doing well in this new social distancing world that we find ourselves living in today. I had never really heard of social distancing or self-quarantine or a number of things. So I guess this is new for all of us, but we will get through this like we get through everything else in this world. But appreciate you guys allowing me to share a few thoughts this morning on a topic that I think everybody will find themselves in multiple times in various parts of their lives. Finding a job is not easy. It's even more difficult to find a job that you're really passionate about. Most people try to do work that's pretty meaningful to them, work that they enjoy, but often it's a struggle because it's not really that simple to get paid doing something you just absolutely love and are really passionate about. Now, the good news is there are plenty of jobs that will challenge you and fit the bill of things you love or are passionate about. But the bad news is there's a lot of people really competing for these jobs. So your goal really, I think, is to find a job, win the job, do well in the job, get consistently promoted, go on to have a great career. I think I can share a lot of insight around how to do that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you guys to practice it and really be the ones that actually do it. Let me start with kind of the simple piece after you've won the job. So let's just jump forward a little bit and say you have already won that job. I know some of you have already interviewed and got jobs before. Others have never interviewed before, so everybody's at a different sort of stage in their journey. But let me just start with giving you kind of that simple piece after you've won your first job. So this is just some good advice that I think all of us could do very simply, because the advice that I'm going to give you is just something that you can choose to do every day. And I can't stress to you enough how what I'm going to tell you is just a choice. It's a simple choice. So show up every day dressed for business with a good attitude. Okay. So when you show up for work, you be one of those people that are dressed well and have a good attitude when you get there. Have a smile on your face. While you're there, do really quality work. Give the company you're working for a little extra. Make a difference in whatever department you're in. Work on the things that the company asks you to work on with some passion and enthusiasm. Help that company to either reduce cost or get more efficient somehow, or generate more sales. Do a little bit of extra other than what you're just asked to do. I really would also like to say that if you get requests from other departments, other people in the company, that you bring that same attitude and smile, work ethic, quality of work ethic to anyone around you, anybody that asks for your help. You're basically going to just be doing all you can do to help the company be successful with a good, positive attitude and a smile with quality work. Those are the things you really get to choose to do. You bring that to the work environment every day. And if you do that kind of stuff, I promise you that you will stand out in those companies and you will move up in those organizations. And there will be people from other departments who really want to hire you. So you can move laterally across an organization, you can move up an organization, you can move to a new company. There's a lot of different ways to keep progressing in your careers, but I will promise you that if you do the simple things, if you show up on time, you're dressed like you're ready for business, you have a really good attitude, you have a smile on your face, you bring quality work, you try to add value and do a little more and work with other people really, really well. Those choices, that choice you get to make will absolutely take you into a wonderful career, because you would be surprised at how many people in an organization. I'm a one person in a 19,000 person organization with over 1,500 in our home office, and you'd be surprised at how many people don't do that. You know, and it's really, really easy to do, to show up with a good, positive attitude and bring energy to an organization. And when you do that, those are the people that really move on in life. The ones that sit around and complain, whine, moan, groan about things not being fair or whatever, those are the ones that generally say there's no upward mobility in a company, or, you know, there's really not much of a chance for them there. So it's really a simple choice to just bring quality to what you do. You know, you've accepted a job wherever you've accepted it, for whatever pay you accepted it. There's no need to complain. You're lucky to be there. Realize you're lucky to be there and make the most of it there with a great attitude and a good smile every day. And you'll win. You'll win big, I promise you. All right. So that's after you got the job. Well, we don't have the job yet. So let's talk about how we might win the job. So let me say just a few things. The job interview, like how many of you, you don't have to answer this, but think about this. Like, how many of you are really excited to go on that first interview and meet some new people and sit down and have a really good conversation about your future? And it's not intimidating at all. It's just man, I can't wait to like call people I don't know and ask them for a job. And is there anybody that's super excited about that? Because if you are, you're in a rare group of people, because they say that over 92% of all the people that have to interview, it is a very, very highly stressful situation for them. And it's not a thing that they want to do, but unfortunately in life, it's something that we're going to have to do, and we'll probably have to do multiple times. On average, by the time you're 35 years old, you'll have probably held somewhere between 8 and 12 different jobs today. So it's not like when Mike and I grew up, where you go to work for, I've been at the same company for 20 years. Mike?
A little over 30.
Yeah, so those days are not gone. There are still companies out there where you can go to work and spend a career there, but they're just fewer and far between, and there's more changing going on today than there used to be. So you will likely have to interview more often than we've had to interview. But that's okay. So let's talk about that, because the job interview is really the biggest sales call you guys will ever go on, selling the product you know best, which is you, right? So a job interview is really just a sales call, and you're trying to convince a company that you're the right person for the job. So there's a lot of different things to be thinking about when you're going to interview. Like, the first thing to start thinking about is like, what kind of companies do I want to go to work for? What would I like to do? As you begin to narrow that down, you know, the first thing to do is to really begin to learn about that company. And it's easy to learn about companies today because you can go online and search them on Google, or you can go to LinkedIn and kind of learn a lot about companies. You can read news articles. The research around a company is really, really simple, easy, and quick today. It used to be very, very difficult, but today it's very simple, won't take you long. And you can learn a lot about what's going on in a company with just 15, 20 minutes. But I'd suggest you spend plenty of time learning about these companies before you actually go interview with them. Once you've got a kind of interview set up, now it's your time to go in there and try to win this job. And that's where I think I can help you guys, because I've spent a lot of my career interviewing people. I'm not sure how many it is now, but it's, probably north of 1,000 people that I've interviewed over time. And, the interviews seem to go very, very similar from my perspective and what I hear from other people. When you first walk into an interview, it's usually kind of uncomfortable, and you meet somebody and they take you back into a conference room or an office and they sit you down, and we can all probably guess what the first question is that they ask you, and it's really a statement. And so usually what it is they just say, well, tell me about yourself. And so then in an interview, that candidate just begins to tell them all about themselves, so they're really creating the second impression. The first impression was the one you walked in with. The second one is you're now talking. So whenever you're talking, you're selling. So whatever you're saying, they're taking it in, and they're going to make a further impression of you. Right? So it's interesting how much a sales call is really like a job interview. It's the exact same thing. But most people will not even really have a chance to win the job because they've done some things really wrong. They've done some things that really discount them from winning. And let's talk about those for a minute, because we want to make sure we don't do those, right? So the first thing would be like how you dress. And, in my past, I would always say, for a guy, you should wear, a coat and tie to an interview. You should try to wear a suit. Things have changed a little bit. Ladies, they should dress very nice, business-like. But it's changing a little bit. And some companies are more casual today, and they really are intimidated by a suit. So you really kind of have to feel out the company and kind of understand the company's culture to understand what that dress code is. But the one mistake that you can make for sure is dressing beneath that dress code. If you make that mistake out of the gate, half of the people at least are going to discount you in the very beginning. Like in the first 2 seconds of knowing you, seeing you, you have lost your opportunity to win that job just because you wanted to be a little more comfortable, or you thought you looked cool in this or that. You've got to really understand the way they dress. If they dress in shorts and t-shirts, that doesn't mean you show up in shorts and t-shirts. What it means is that you still dress nice in a business casual look. You may even have a sport coat on. You may not have a sport coat, but you may have a pair of khakis and a dress shirt on. But what you're not going to have on is shorts and t-shirts. And, you've got to look much better than what they look like. So you have to make sure that you don't get discounted in that first few minutes. And that's really, really important. So the other thing that's really, really important is they say about 20% of the people that go to a job interview are late. Now, I know people in the business world that will absolutely, if you're late, you get zero chance. Like they won't even meet you. Like I had a boss one time that if someone showed up for an interview and they were late, then he just wouldn't see them and they would be discounted and that would be it. And those people aren't rare. If you don't care enough about showing up on time for your interview, I'm pretty sure that you really don't care that much about that job, or at least that's the perception. The other side of that is something can happen on the way to an interview. Like when you're ready to go to an interview, do you really know where it is? Do you know exactly where it is? You know, you might be going from Reston to Fairfax. Do you know where that business is or where that place is exactly? Do you know exactly how long it takes to get there in a perfect world or in a really bad traffic? Or, you know, my suggestion would be is try to get there about an hour early and spend some time preparing in the car, but make sure that you're never late for that interview. You're going to be early for that interview every time. All right. So you've prepared and you've researched the company. You're ready to go because you're dressed well. You're there early, ready to shoot. And now it's time to go in and introduce yourself. You walk in the front door. You treat that person at the desk there with respect. And you're on your best behavior. You're businesslike. You're polite. You're something people would like to see come through the door to potentially come to work there. So once you're there, you're now going to meet somebody who's going to send you back more than likely, or you might just meet somebody there up front. And now it's time to go back and you're going to meet somebody for the first time. So when you meet somebody for the first time, well, might not be shaking too many hands in the near future, but in the past, you might shake their hand and look in their eye and tell them it's nice to meet them. But just do what you do normally. And you got to just really think about your nerves a little bit because you want to be confident. You do not want to be arrogant. Nobody likes anybody arrogant who knows it all. But you do want to be confident and you want to try to show that you can handle the nerves of a tough situation like this, which takes practice. But once you kind of get there, all I really want you to think about is you're just going to go hang out with a friend and have a chat. Basically, all you're going to do is take your personality that you have and you're going to drop that into a business setting and you're just going to have a good business conversation, right? And a good business conversation just looks like asking some questions, learning some things. So really at this point, your whole goal, if you want to win this job, is you've got to figure out a few things. So really, you're kind of like the inspector, or your job's to just learn, right? Because what you want to do is you want to learn enough about this opportunity to be able to sell yourself. And you don't want to sell yourself ever until you know what you're trying to sell. Does that make sense? The worst thing you can do in the opening of a job interview is to have them tell me all about yourself, and then you tell them a whole bunch of things that they don't really like. So before you even get started, you've lost. So you have to be really, really careful there. And what I would suggest that you do is when they tell you, hey, tell me about yourself. That's what they're going to tell you. I mean, if you go on interviews, I promise you're going to hear it, and you probably already heard, well, tell me about yourself. What I want you guys to do is say, look, I'd be happy to tell you about myself, but do you mind if I ask a few questions first? And they'll go, no, sure. And so now you don't discount yourself right in the beginning, because you could say, well, I'll tell you what, one of the things I really love are like these scary movies. And then somebody's thinking, well, what? You know, they hate scary movies, or it could be anything, right? So you just want to make sure you don't discount yourself or lose before you get started. So now our job is to figure out a few things. Now, they're hiring for a reason, right? They want to hire somebody. Why do they want to hire somebody for that job? You know, you think about some of these things. Why would they want to hire somebody? Who's actually doing the hiring? What does the hiring process really look like? What do all those things sort of add up to, right? So you got to think about like things like, you know, whatever job they're looking for, like of all the people that have done this in the past, who have done this really, really well? What did they do? How did they do it? You're learning about this role. What do you really expect out of this role? Who's done it well? What could they have done better? So now you're learning about the job, and they're basically all they're doing, your questions are just going to give you enough information to know what you should be selling. So if they said, I really like this person to be on time. I like them to do this type of work. I want them to be able to work this type of hours. I want them to do this. You know that you can sell all that stuff, right? I can do this. I can do that. I can do this. All of those things they want. Your job's really to figure out everything that they want out of this job. What type of person do they want? How do they want them to behave? What type of work do they want them to do? All of those things. What are their pet peeves? Once you figure out all of the stuff, like who's actually making the decision? What does that decision process look like? Are there multiple players? Will there be multiple interviews? What's the job about? What are all the different things? Once you learn all that, you really then kind of know what to sell. And it's okay to bring a list of questions. You can think about a bunch of questions that you'd want to ask to learn all these things. So there's a lot of stuff in that little area that gets tricky, but being prepared for all that's probably the best advice I could give you. Let's stop right there just for a second, and we'll kind of see where everybody is and maybe answer a few questions right now, and then I'll drop back into it. And don't be afraid to ask questions, because this is a tricky little topic.
I have a question. So when you're in an interview and they ask you what's your biggest, what's the word? Well, you don't know the word, you don't know what I'm talking about. Sorry.
Like strengths or weaknesses, or?
Yeah, your biggest weakness. How do you answer that question without messing yourself up for getting the job position?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's one of the likely questions that they'll ask, or tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses. And I think it's okay to be honest about what your weaknesses are. When you're really searching for a weakness and you can't really find one, they know you're a little bit, you kind of think a lot of yourself, right? But for me, like my weaknesses, I have a lot of weaknesses, and I work on those weaknesses all the time. For me, listening is a weakness. And sometimes I only listen to people I think I can learn a lot from, and don't listen to other people as much as I should, because I can learn a lot from anybody. And I know that, but I still have to really, so I would say if somebody asked me that question, I need to listen better and be more focused when I'm listening. I don't think there's a really a wrong answer here, as long as it's not something crazy, right? My biggest weakness is I'm always late to everything, and I just don't do quality work. And, you can't go down those paths, but being honest about your weaknesses is okay. Anybody that's interviewing, they're human. And so I think, being honest about that's okay.
Thank you.
You bet. How many of you guys have gone on interviews before? Lots?
Hey, Pat, we have a question here from Charlotte. She wants to know, can you give examples of questions that you ask during your interviews?
Sure. So probably the biggest question I ask is, tell me what you're really passionate about, and tell me some things that you've done in your lifetime at a really high level. And it doesn't really matter if it's around business. If you were a saxophone player in high school and you ended up being really good, or whatever it is, what have you done in your life where you've done at a really high level? That's one of the ones that I ask all the time. I always ask, why do you want this job? Why are you considering leaving the job you're in? Those are some of the things that I really like to ask.
We have another question as, can you give examples of questions that it's okay, that you should ask your interviewer, like questions that they would ask you?
Yeah. So the big thing to remember is the job that they have, they're filling for a reason. And so one of the best questions you can ask is, tell me why this job's open today, right? Why is this job open today? And what do you hope to accomplish by having someone in this job? And what are the things in this job where people have been successful in the past? What did they do? And what else do you think they could have done to be even more successful? And that way you're learning who was really good at this and all the things that they did well. Then when it's your time to talk, you can share experiences, or you can share why you feel like you can do all these things that are very important to them. And I promise you guys that, I would say probably 'd probably say 99% of the people that interview will never ask those questions. They will never dive in deep enough to really understand what the person doing the hiring is really looking for, and what a person who's been successful in the past has done, and what else they could have done. And that information gives you everything that you need to know to sell yourself. And that's the critical thing about winning a job, is you're actually going to have to sell yourself. And there's no way you can sell yourself if you don't know what they're looking for. You can't just like come in and be this high energy, wonderful person and tell them all how great you are if it doesn't line up to what they're really looking for. And what you want to do is figure out what their need is, and you want to demonstrate the capability that you have that meets that need. And when you do that, that's when they hire you.
I'm going to paraphrase a question here, but one of the questions was about whether is there a difference between an in-person interview and a phone interview, and how you should ask your questions or how you should interact?
So I think when you're like in a situation like we're in right now, it should be no different than if we were face to face in person. It's the same thing, right? You do have one advantage though. You could have props around you that help you, right? So you can be a little more prepared if it's virtual than if we were together. Together, you really have to move on your feet really, really well, and you don't have anything to really help you. Like today, I have some notes that I have that could help me keep on track if I needed to. But I don't have many notes because I've talked about this subject a lot. And really, it's best if, in these environments, if you just have a good casual conversation about things. It's a little harder in a big group, but one-on-one, I would say don't treat it any differently. You need to show up dressed, on time, all the same things.
All right, another question is, what was the hardest question you ever had to answer in an interview, and how did you answer it?
That is a great question. And let me give that a little bit of thought, because I don't have anything that it's been so long ago for me now. I would probably say, so I last interviewed really like in 2000. And it wasn't even really an interview as much as it was so I'd say the formal interview, I did go through that with Ben Hogan Company. And probably the toughest question I had at that time in my life was they asked me, why should I hire you? That was the last question they asked me, is why should I hire you? And for me, I remember telling them, I'll tell you just a little background story, but, that was a job that I really, really wanted. And I knew when I was 16 years old that I wanted to be in the golf business, and I wanted to be an outside salesperson in the golf business. Before I ever went off to college, I already kind of knew what I wanted to do with my life, which is rare. It's not something you see very often, but, So I really wanted that job. So I prepared a lot, and I was very, very aggressive and like waiting in the parking lot for the director of marketing. So it was an over the top kind of experience, but he did ask me, why should I hire you? And I said, I remember saying to him, I'm the guy that wasn't qualified for the job in your mind. And I was the guy that you dodged more than anybody else. I tried to call you, you wouldn't return my calls. But I kept after it, and I was willing to sit in the parking lot and sit in the lobby. And I think how passionate I am about this business and how hard I'm willing to work and what I'm willing to do to get things done. So I think that should be enough. And what actually happened in that job was I wasn't actually qualified. At that time, what they were asking for was an MBA and 5 years experience with a manufacturing golf company. But as I was walking out the door after my third interview, which I was not going to get the job, the president of the company actually walked out of his office. You talk about timing in life. The president of the company walked out of the office and bumped into us. And he introduced me to the president. And the president goes, "Hey, is this the kid that's been waiting in the lobby and in the parking lot for you?" And he's like, yeah, that's him. And he goes, "Well, are you going to hire him?" And he goes, "Well, no, this job requires this." And he goes, "Well, if you don't hire him, I'll hire him." And I said, "Okay." And so they started talking, and the president of the company talked the director into the marketing. Instead of hiring me as a product manager for golf clubs, to hire me as the assistant product manager of golf clubs. And if I did a good job, then they would promote me to product manager, which I did, yes. But that was a story of persistence and luck and timing. But that was to literally win the job of my dreams in my early 20s and really set the stage for my whole career. But none of that would have happened without, being persistent and making sure that they knew how much I wanted that job and what I was willing to do to get it. So a little bit of luck, a little bit of timing, but a whole lot of persistence, So sorry that was a long-winded answer to a very short question.
Mr. Martin, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but we have a question on how do you handle information when the interviewer tells you something that is not a particular strength of yours?
So that's okay. One of the things that I think all of us will do the rest of our lives is learn. Life's a learning experience, and everything we need to know we'll eventually learn. But when there's some things that are really important to them, and they're not your strength, you still have to show them some of what you are that can match to that, but also say that you're willing to learn things. Being a learner and willing to learn is a big deal. And they don't expect you to know everything, but if you're willing to learn and one particular strength, some of the things that you ought to be thinking about, like if you, in that situation, maybe you're writing a thank you note at the end, and maybe you've asked about a book around that you could learn more about it. Mention that in a thank you letter. Thanks for the tip on the book. I'm going out and getting it today. And then send them another note talking about how you learned about that. So this interview thing's a process over time, and you'll build relationships, and you may not get the first interview and win, but you might get the second one, or next time, and things happen. So you just have to keep plugging along.
And then Sammy asks, when the interviewer asks you a question, is it bad to take a minute and think, or should you just answer right away?
No, I think it's okay to say, let me give that some thought. That's a good question. And then when you're ready to answer it, be ready. A little bit of silence is okay. Don't feel like you have to fill the void of that silence all the time. They'll know you're thinking, and that's okay.
I think that's all the questions we have for now. Mr. Martin, if you wanted to continue.
You got it. So let's talk about, I've got a list of things which I can send to you guys. Sandy, if you want, I can send it to you. But some of the things that, you know, I have a list here that I've added to over time, but I'll kind of review the list, some of which I've covered, and then the others we'll talk about a little bit. But it kind of starts with learning about the company, understanding where the interview is, how long it takes to get there, who the decision makers are, showing up early, dressing appropriately, all that stuff, right? Then one of the things that I can't tell you how important this is. See these things right here? I've got one ringing right now. It's ringing on my iWatch. Don't bring those to an interview. Leave those in your car. Like you will not get the job if you're looking down at your phone at any point during that interview. This thing is of no use to you in an interview. You leave this thing in your car and you can get back to that later, but that will not help you in a job interview. Now, there are these old-fashioned things called paper and pen that we'll want to bring into an interview, right? It's okay to ask questions and take notes. So make sure you do not bring your phone in there because you will be tempted to, or you might leave the ringer on. That phone cannot help you in there. So paper and pen, and bring 2 pens in case one goes out. So we got 2 pens and a piece of paper, we're ready to roll. Take notes. Now think about this one. Why do you want the job? They may or may not ask you that, but that might be good information for you to tell them. But think about why you want that particular job. All right, you're going to get some objections, right? One of the things that I really want you guys to be good at is asking the right questions. You know, you can think about all of that before you go. But the more they talk and the less you talk, the better your chances are to win. Now, let me say that again. The more they talk and the less you talk, the better your chances are to win. Because every time you open your mouth, you could cause yourself to lose that job. Every time. So the more you talk, the more you lose. And that's everything in life, by the way. So we want them to do all the talking. This is your interview, right? You want this mindset. I found a company I might like to go to work for. I found a job that I might like. And now I need to decide if I'm going to let them hire me to do that job. But I'm going to interview them. They're not going to interview me. That needs to be your mindset. That's the big switch, right? You're going to interview this company. There's no question in your mind you're the right person for the candidate, for the job. You're the right candidate. It's your job to go win. So let's interview this company. Let's decide if we want to go to work there, not if they want us. Of course they want us, right? By the time we're finished with them, they'll want us. But let's ask the questions. Let's control this interview. This is our interview to take over and interview them. And now we're going to learn who the decision makers are. You know, who's going to make this decision? Is it a team of people? Is it one person? What are their needs? What do they need in this, right? Those are the big things to learn. Now, you will come across some objections or some questions, but think about if you're asking all the questions, if it's an hour-long interview, you're asking all the questions and you're managing that time, they can only ask you but so many questions, right? So now you got to be prepared to answer the questions. And the questions they're going to ask you is, tell me about yourself. Tell me your strengths. Tell me your weaknesses. Give me an area where you've done really well in, or that, you know, you can go online and go standard interview questions. Here comes 25 of them, and there they are. and most everybody asks them. You know, that's what an interview really looks like. You walk through the front door and you tell me about yourself, blah, 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 blah. They go down a list of questions. Our goal is to be different, right? We want to be different. We want to stand out. So we don't want to let them just take us through those lists of questions. We want to be asking all the questions, learning everything we need to know, and then demonstrating our capability against the needs we uncovered. Does that make sense? Because that's a big shift from what really happens in the interview process. I mean, if you're going for a really good job, you're going to be competing against a number of qualified candidates, and chances are there are many candidates more qualified than you. That's just the nature of life. There are older people that have more experience, all kinds of things. So you have to stand out, and you stand out by doing a bunch of things right from the very beginning of that interview to the end. All right, a few more things here. One of the things I want you guys to never do is talk bad about other employers or other people. When you're in an interview setting, you may have worked at McDonald's for the summer and now you're interviewing for another job. The last thing that new company wants to hear is about your bad experience at McDonald's or anywhere else, or how you had a boss there that didn't do this or didn't do that. Not only for your interview, but in your life, just take the high road. Nobody likes a whiner. Everybody likes a winner, you know? So don't worry about other people and how someone treats you. You take control of your life, treat people with respect, be a good person, be nice. Don't be one of those people who has bad things to say about people. It just doesn't, there's nothing good that will come out of life of you saying something bad about someone else, especially in an interview process, talking about some other employer. So just don't talk bad about people and you'll be fine. Positive energy. Life's about choice, right? So I would make an argument that if you were born in America, you were just lucky, right? And as a result of being born in America, you were born into just a spoiled nation. Like we are, even though we're going through a pandemic, of which most nations are going through, it's still pretty good here. And the government's doing lots of things. This is probably the most wonderful place to live on the planet. And you were just lucky enough to be born here or somehow made it here and have an opportunity here. And it's the easiest place in the world to be successful if you just try. Like if you put forth some effort, because we're spoiled. What are the, you think about the things we complain about in life. We complain about things like our internet speed's not fast enough. Or it's hot out today. Or it's cold out today. Or my phone's not working right. The traffic, it's awful. Like all these things we complain about. There's a line to get food. We're a spoiled nation, and that's okay. We don't know any better. Most of us haven't traveled across the globe and see what the most of the world lives like, but there's not many places on the planet that lives like this. So you're lucky. And to be successful in life and to be successful in a job interview, you really got to bring some positive energy to this world, right? And have a good attitude every day. So that positive energy is a big deal on an interview. Don't come in meek and mild, go in happy. You're like with your friends. Just think you're with your best friends hanging out. We're just gonna have a good conversation. We're only gonna make it a little more professional than we would with our friends, right? We're not going in there saying all these sayings that we say. I know what you guys say. So we just take it up a notch in professionalism, but bring that positive energy. The other thing is, most people when they interview will never ask about the next steps. And that's really, really critical, is to understand what are the next steps, right? We've now interviewed, the interview's kind of come to a close. Time's run out, they've asked some questions, you've asked questions. Now, Most people go, oh, thank you, and leave and can't wait to get out of there, right? Our job here is just to go, let's talk about next steps. And you can even share, here's what I'm thinking. I'll give you a couple of days to think about it. I'll think about it for a couple of days as well. What do you say we get back together next week and talk about it? They're not going to hear that very often, but that's what you need to do to win, is you have to push the process along. How many more interviews do you have? What, blah, 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 blah. You just want to push that process along. And that takes time to get really good at, you know, but just, I want you guys to just be thinking about it. What are the next steps? How will I get to further convince them I'm the right person? That's really what you want to be thinking about. Don't let it just end and I'll call you. Because you know what? They're not going to call you. And that's just the way life is. And you're like, well, they were going to call. Well, their job, but you know, I sit back and I wait. Like I tell candidates, you know, okay, we'll be in touch. And what that really means is one of my administrative assistants is going to send them a letter that we've hired somebody else. Because I'm not going to get back in touch. They need to come chase me, right? They need to show me that they're aggressive and they're interested in this job. So I won't, even if I really love the candidate, I just have to wait for them to follow up and really try to win this job. Because if they're not passionate about winning the job, I'm not really passionate about hiring them. So next steps and follow up. Make sure you write a thank you letter. And don't think that I'm going to ask you to do something that you may or may not even know how to do. And that's actually write a letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and put it in the mail. You may not even know how to do that anymore, but you increase your odds. 30% of the people don't even get a chance to win a job because they didn't send a thank you letter. It matters. And I don't care what Google says on what interviews, or I can tell you right now, it still matters today. If you don't know how to do that, learn, because it matters. And that will give you an edge over the other people applying for the jobs. The final thing is really just to be aggressive, right? I talked about a little bit earlier about how I was aggressive chasing that one job. I was willing to wait in the parking lot to meet them because they wouldn't see me. Go do that. Do whatever it is you have to do. Be as aggressive as you have to be to get in front of people and share with them your story. Don't be afraid. The worst thing they can do is say no. But don't be afraid. Just go. Just be passionate, enthusiastic about what you want to do with your life and go share that with them. Tell them that you're willing to work hard and you'll be on time and you'll do all the right things. That's what they want to hear, you know, and the more passionate you are about that and the more persistent you are about that, the more likely you are to win. So I know it's a lot to chew on in a short amount of time. And, you know, you could spend literally months and months and months talking through all the different things that could happen in an interview. But, you know, I wanted to boil it down to the things that really make a difference for you guys. You guys are a group of people that are already a step ahead, being in the FBLA and learning some of the things that you're learning and your maturity level around a lot of things. Taking this one more step to really get good at this thing, which is winning a job, is something worth doing. And it's something worth paying a lot of attention to because, you know, it's going to be the critical thing for you as you go forward. You know, you have to first win a job, and then you have to be really good at what you do to win the next job. And you're going to be interviewing, whether you're interviewing at another company or the same company, talking to a boss about next steps is still interviewing. And so all these same principles apply. And if you do those things and you're aggressive, not obnoxious, but aggressive, right? Not arrogant, but confident, then you'll win. And so, you know, Sandy, happy to take any more questions, Brian. But I think that's enough. I don't want to give you too much. But I think that's enough to kind of sort of round it out to be thinking about how you can separate yourselves from other people as you go through this.
I'm glad you answered the thank you note because one of the questions was that it is okay to send an email, and I was hoping that you would answer that question. So email's fine, but the old-fashioned thank you note still matters.
Well, it just separates you while everybody else, it's okay to send the other thing too is it's okay to send a short email and thanking them, and then a more thoughtful thank you note on paper. So that if everybody's sending thank you notes in, which they won't be, half the people won't even do it. And of the half that might, they'll do an email. So you'll have an email in there and a thank you note following. You'll get 2 impressions.
Right.
And you win. I mean, that's how you win. I mean, you're competing against these other people. You got to beat them. You know, that's what you want to do is you want to beat these other folks.
Right. All right, Mr. Farrell, what do you think? Are we
Good. If Zach wants to close us out, I think we're good.
Close
Thank
us
you,
out
Mr.
strong,
Martin.
Zach.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, for that great advice. Thank you so much. A recording of this session will be on the FBLA YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us today. Tune in on Monday to learn more about the Virginia FBLA State Service Project and partner Project Ask. Let's keep finding a way to make a world of opportunity.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr.